Validating business ideas. Does your idea solve a problem? Or does it solve anything you perceive as a problem but improves your life in a meaningful way? What is the value proposition? Can you find buyers? Is there a market? Does anyone care? Why is it so hard to validate business ideas? That's what we are going to find out today. Let's get started. In this event from Union Startup Building Series, we are inviting David Carvalhão to find out what he thinks about ideas and ventures, and how we distinguish those that are viable and those that should be left behind. David is an obsessive serial entrepreneur, polymath, creative thinker, and public speaker. He has 24 startups under his belt. He has some tech patents and a track records for getting exotic things done. For the past few years, he has been helping startups getting to the market as a business angel, trainer, and mentor at some of the best acceleration programs in Europe, such as Lisbon Challenge, EDP Energy Accelerator, and the European Innovation Academy, as well as being an expert in disruptive business technology evaluator for the European Commission and a few European investment funds. So, David, I know you are interested in everything venture and entrepreneurship related, but you are also very interested in conscience, ethics, history, science, engineering. So, are you a Renaissance man, David?
Hi, Carlos. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be in the Union of Venture Builders videocast. It is a pleasure to be here in such good company. Especially, we go way back in our acquaintance of one another, and we share a lot of opinions and thoughts about the industry. I was trained as a Renaissance man, so my education was focused on providing me with the largest set of experiences possible as a way to create, let's say, the widest ranging thought processes possible. That was what my parents were trying to do with me, and I think that they have achieved at least somewhat the goal. Yes, I am interested in several very disparate areas. Although I may say that my conclusion throughout the years is that most of the knowledge that I acquire in one area ends up having applications in other areas. There are a lot of concepts that are unified, let's say, and therefore I take a lot of things I learned in science that I apply in business. A lot of things in business I apply in life. A lot of things I learned through self-knowledge, meditation, yoga, and other practices that I end up applying in the way I position myself in the market. So if I'm not a Renaissance man, at least I can say I try to be one.
Okay. So maybe that's why everyone knows you in the ecosystem. Everyone knows your involvement in many of the most interesting projects in the startup ecosystem, and you are involved in most of the most important incubation and accelerators, and our ecosystem has more than 150 different incubators and accelerators. They have different focus and objectives, but Um, for those, a great effort is made to help startups getting better and getting more interesting to be successful startups. But we heard a lot of accelerators. People from the teams say that many of the projects that applied do not have much potential to be a startup. In your experience, do you think the ideas are weak, or it depends on the context, the sector, the business model? Is it a problem of the founders? Why do you think this happens?
Well, that question is very interesting, and I think it leads up to the topic of this talk. We see a lot of ideas that are clearly not being worked enough. Although things have been improving significantly in Portugal over the last few years, but there is still a leftover of a mentality to a lot of entrepreneurs that, hey, look, I have an idea, now make me rich. Okay?
Yeah.
So there's a lack of understanding that the idea represents sometimes 10-15% of the success of a startup. It's the implementation then that counts. So you see a lot of entrepreneurs starting to develop their ideas with very little groundwork done, very little analysis of what their idea could become, very little understanding on how the market would receive such an idea, and we end up often having to to kill the puppies, as we fondly call it in the European Innovation Academy, to kill the puppies of these entrepreneurs that have this wide-eyed approach and a dreamy approach to business, and then we have to be sometimes. Well, it's always unpleasant to have someone tell you that your idea is not as simple as you make it, and we sometimes have to destroy these illusions for the sake of the entrepreneur. But I think this is the biggest problem we find. And yes, still today I would say that more than half of the startups that apply for acceleration programs are not viable startups, are not viable concepts.
Yeah. But ideation and acceleration are different structures. In the phase of acceleration, in my opinion, it's not the place to stress test assumptions on ideas, on market valuation. That shouldn't be done before in the ideation phase. How can we solve that?
Well, I guess that's a very fair point. The thing is, a lot of these startups that apply for acceleration programs, in their perspective, they already done some sort of validation. Of course, that this validation usually comes in the form of asking your friends and family what they think about the project and little else. And it's some of them even do market studies. They go out into the market and they do some polls, online polls, or they go to the streets and they interview some people. And it's very hard to explain to these people that, listen, if someone is already willing to answer you, if someone is your friend or family, if someone has taken the time to respond to a poll of someone that probably someone requested them to answer that poll, already the mindset of that person is going to be positive towards the idea. And it carries literally zero cost for the person to say good things about your project, and it carries a cost to say bad things. Because if you have a family member that says, hey, you're great, you're amazing, your idea is great, you're going to be happy with him. No cost for that person, only gain. You lose because you didn't get information, but from the person who's giving you the opinion, it's only a gain. On the other hand, if they tell you, no, your idea sucks and you're not going anywhere with it, you might be upset, so that person loses something. So usually these types of validation are close to worthless, I would say. The only real validation, in my opinion, usually comes from getting people to commit to buy, and commit to buy is to, at least sign an intention that carries a price tag associated with it. And only then you are ready to really be accelerated and cover that gap to market. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So we see a lot of these ideas reaching our acceleration programs, applying when the validation they've had is very cursory, very superficial, and therefore usually during the acceleration require a lot of pivots around the idea as they gather this information, and then they discover that their idea needs some sort of adjustment to become a business.
Yeah. Maybe it's not a pivot, but maybe it's the ideation process itself that it's happening during the acceleration and not before. But should the applying process as somehow ways of filtering that?
Yes, there's. I would say that the first responsibility of a mentor working in an acceleration program, or someone who's a panel that is evaluating submissions, the first thing that is their responsibility is really to weed out the bad ideas, to kill the dreams, and the bad ideas are not necessarily only the product or service in itself. A lot of times this comes in the form of a bad business model or a bad structuring of the logistics to deliver what they intend. I usually tell, and this is the truth. I have a list of about 200 ideas that I keep. So whenever I have an idea, I write it down. I have a list of about 200, and on an average year, I will process about 10 to 12 of those ideas. And what I mean by process is I will pick an idea that I think it's good, and I will start doing a cursory evaluation on how the market would react to it, what would be the potential of scaling, what would be the potential reception of a new product, how competition would respond. And after that, if the idea still looks good, then perhaps I'll do a cursory business plan for the idea. And the end result is that on average, I move forward with less than one idea per year. So I evaluate 10 to 12 per year, and I move forward with less than one. That's my average. And this is a process that most people don't know how to do, and it's natural because most of them are doing it for the first time. They hang on, and it's natural because when you have an idea, you fall in love with your idea. And actually, in this perspective, perhaps the entrepreneurial ecosystem is doing a disservice to these people because we see recurrently this idea being sold of fall in love with your dream, follow your passion, put it through against all odds and all adversity. So people believe that, if everyone is telling them that it's not going to work and the numbers are telling them that it's not going to work, they should still do it because they're in love with their idea. It's passion that drives it. Well, business doesn't happen that way, unfortunately. Passion is important, but it's not enough. So I think that's there is a process. The process has steps. They have been widely identified You know them, I know them, a lot of mentors know them, a lot of entrepreneurs fortunately know them too. But I think that the most important thing in this process is that the entrepreneur needs to be ready to kill their idea if it's bad.
Yeah. But tell me something. Uh, if the incubators or accelerators in their role, in their model, uh, have a focus on the quantity of the startups or projects that they have enrolled in their programs. This initial process of don't allow some weaker appliances it's a problem for them. It is part of the problem.
Yes, yes, definitely, and especially we have to remind ourselves that usually accelerators have, well, not usually, but a lot of accelerators have two business models that are running concurrently. On one hand, they have the startups that they're accelerating, let's say, on their own, that they're accelerating as part of their activity, usually associated with their own investment fund or investment fund that is covering them. And then you have the custom, the designer-made acceleration programs that they run for clients. And of course, if you are running an acceleration program for a client, first you're being paid, and you're being paid to provide a certain number of startups that are going to be going through the program. And of course, also, and this makes sense at the end of the day. So the company that is buying the service of providing an accelerated program in a certain vertical, that company cannot make the accelerator responsible for the success, because that it may just happen that there are no good ideas in the market. That can happen. So no responsibility on success is placed on the accelerator. So at the end of the day, the incentives really are there, especially in let's say vertical accelerator programs for customers. The incentives are there to accept quantity over quality. Then, of course, it all boils down to the responsibility and the work ethics of the accelerator that runs that program. In the long end, of course, in the long run, you are going to have a certain number of successes. Otherwise, your reputation in the market will suffer. But yes, it is a problem, and still today, I would say. I often find, especially in these designer-made, let's say, acceleration programs for clients, I find startups that have no place being there. Sometimes they're really forced, let's say.
Yeah. And there is another nuance of this problem, which is related with the specifics of what can we consider a startup, because a startup is a very specific type of company. It's not an unusual company, and most of the times we also heard from responsible people on accelerators that many of the appliances are not startups, are common companies, common businesses that were not could considered like a startup, an exponential growth type of company, which is a startup. Again, I think all of those criteria should be easier to put on the appliance, on the type of process that the programs use for the appliance. Because in the end, the mentors and the teams then are going to work with weaker projects, weaker ideas, or and ideas with no fit with the objectives of the programs. But this is the problem. How can the founders by themselves have a clear idea on how to kill your cool idea or weak idea? Because in the end, it's their time, it's their investment, it's the resources from his time and sometimes the money for their friends and family. It's their best interest. How can they solve that? How can they make a process for them similar to yours? How can they learn? How can they start?
Well, I think that there is no easy answer for that question, so I'm going to give you the complicated one.
Okay.
I think that the first step that is really important, and we were mentioning earlier the importance of taking the learning that you do in one part of your life to another part of your life. I think that first you need to be very mindful of your own ego. That is the first step, especially if you have an idea. It's very easy to start identifying yourself with that idea and the success of that idea, which means that from your personal standpoint, now you are psychologically invested in the idea. You need to make the idea work, because if it doesn't work, it means that you're wrong. And if you're wrong, your ego will suffer, because you believe that tells you something about yourself. So the first thing, which is not easy at all, is you need to detach yourself from your idea. You need to accept that your idea is an entity which exists outside yourself. Once the idea exists, you are now a tool in the service of that idea, and it is the potential outcome. So it should be in your mind that the outcome of terminating the idea is as much of a success as carrying through with the idea. So killing a bad idea is as much of a success for you as an individual, as an entrepreneur, as carrying through with a bad idea. And as you were saying, the reasoning is very simple. If you are going to be investing your life, your money, we were talking about time of your life, in an idea that is really not that good, you're really doing yourself a disservice. You're really hurting yourself on behalf of being right, on behalf of the pleasure of being right. So the first thing is trying to create this mindset of separating yourself from the idea. Then the second thing is you listen, and you listen hard, and you have to bring your ideas to people that dislike them. You need to find people that hate your ideas. And when someone tells you something bad about your idea, you do not open your mouth to argument. You do not fight back. You just ask more information. Tell me more. Explain me why you think that way. You explain me what could change your mind. You keep your mouth shut with your arguments, and you just listen. And you need to find as many people as you can that have bad things to say about your idea, because close people will always tell you great things. Your parents will most likely think that you're the greatest person in the world and that your ideas are always amazing. You need to find the ones that tell you otherwise, and you collect information, and then you need to assess that information carefully. And this is even before we go into the other stuff. You need to assess that information carefully, and you need to see the merit in that information. And in case that you have objections, then you need to see what could be done to face those objections, but without facing the person immediately. As you know, Carlos, yesterday we had a presentation of one of my projects to a couple of ministers, and the nurse that was using our solution, who is not part of our team, so she came just to demonstrate, to do the demo of the solution. She had some bad feedback about our solution. She had two things that she didn't like. She liked everything, and when she said but, I shut my mouth and I said, please tell me. Please tell me. And I disagree with what she's thinking, but I don't, I don't count. She's going to be my potential client. So what she thinks, even if she's wrong, even if I have a good argument, it means that I was not able to communicate with my product or service that the problem that she's putting forth is solved. It means that I'm failing. It means that I need to listen to that feedback, even though I know that, I already have something to address that. But clearly I'm failing. So you need to be ready to fail, to kill your idea, and you need to get this feedback. After this, then you can go to analyzing, the merit of your idea from a market perspective, from a logistics perspective. You need to make a profit first. Well, let me correct here. Usually you need to make a profit. There's a lot of very successful startups that never turned a profit. Twitter is a great case. They never, Airbnb, they never had a profit. Uber, they never had a profit. and still, they made their founders extremely rich. But usually most companies will have to make a profit. You will need to convince your customers to buy. You will need to scale. So you need to understand logistics. So you need to put all that in a paper. You need to have a response to all that. And then, in my opinion, of course, this is a very biased opinion because I am a mentor such as yourself, but then you should reach out to someone who has more experience than you and ask them what you think about that. And most mentors, at least in Portugal, are willing to have a conversation with you, at least for 1 hour, without charging you anything and without hassling you.
Sometimes way more than 1 hour.
Yes, precisely. And again, you listen and you listen hard. And until you have a good response to all of those objections, until you have something that in numbers makes sense, until you have studied your problem and your solution and the logistics and how much money it will cost and how much money you will get and how valid your assumptions are, because you'll always startup business plan is always a bunch of assumptions, and on top of that you build a plan. But it's a plan that is only as good as the assumptions, and you need to validate those. Once you have that done, then perhaps you have a startup.
There's something interesting here also, because you, David, work directly with investment groups, investors, making the work of scouting projects and understanding interesting projects, so they can invest. And that is a very specific and interesting role, because you are making the scouting process is selecting ones and not selecting others. It's choosing, using your knowledge, your experience, and using the parameters that you already know that are the specific interesting points in the investment potential vision that your investors, your partners have. So you have a very focused idea when you are making the choices. That is something that the founders don't easily understand. What are the specifics? What difference makes looking to the idea with the eyes of the founder or with the eyes of the expert or the investor?
Yes. Okay. So the first thing that we always pay a lot of attention before we even look at the idea is the team. You can have the best idea in the world if you don't have a team that has the right skill sets and has the right mindset to execute the idea. That idea is going nowhere. When you are investing in a startup, you are buying a concept, yes, but you're buying a team. And when you're picking up a startup, like in the beginning, with very few exceptions, there are some startups that have gotten some funding already. They already have some assets, but most startups, they come to us and they're nothing. I mean, they don't have, from a financial perspective. If you would take their financials to an accountant, their accountant would say that they're bankrupt, that they're worth nothing, because they don't have any assets, they don't have buildings, they don't have paying customers, they don't have revenue. So above all, at that point, the value of a startup is the idea and is the team behind it. So we always pay a lot of attention to this. We try to assess if the skill sets that are required to take this idea to market are there, how the team works together, how responsible the team is. For instance, one thing that for me is a deal breaker is if the team takes too long to respond to my emails when I'm requesting information. Even if it is just to say, we didn't have that, we're working on it, we'll give it by X, and then they fulfill that deadline. That tells me a lot about their ability to work together to fulfill that objective. So first the team. Then when we look at the idea, or my analysis, and I've built a model to evaluate startups that I'm now putting in a white paper that I hope that will be validated by a university soon. My concept is I always look at how much money and time it would take me to copy your idea. So, because at the end of the day, a competitor is going to be looking at that. Is a potential buyer of your company is going to be evaluating how much your company is worth in relation to how much it would cost them to build a competitor that would take you off the market. And in this analysis, I consider things like how far along the path you are, so how much work you have produced and how much time it would take me to do the same amount of work, how good the team is and how much money it would cost me to get a team similar to yours. If I started copying you today and you kept the rhythm of work that you have now, how far ahead would you be? How quickly are you able to acquire the early adopters in the market, which are usually the customers that have the lowest customer acquisition cost? And how much of these easy picks, let's say, of the market, you're able to acquire before a competitor would reach the market with a competitive product, and other barriers to competition, such as intellectual property protection, and so forth. So, but at the end of the day, the mindset is how much money you're able to do, and how much money it would cost me to copy you. So if you have a great team, it's hard to put together great teams. That has a value. If you have a great idea and you did already most of the groundwork in terms of market analysis, in terms of market validation, it takes time and money to do that. If you already have the logistics figured out, if you have the technological basis figured out, it will take me time and money to do that. But at the end of the day, I look at all that, plus your potential to make money on the market, and I come up with a price. But that price literally is very correlated to how much it costs to copy you. And I know it's a strange mindset, but if you don't have it, your competitors will.
Yeah.
Because that's what your competitors are going to be thinking like.
Yeah. It's a very interesting. That's where I was thinking the conversation goes, because the way investors and competitors look at startups, at ideas or projects, are very different from the vision and the mindset of the founders. And sometimes they are far from understanding that. But there are different challenges that they have to respond. The market is full of content related with startups, content talking about going to the markets with the product you have, or waiting to have the best product you have, you possibly can produce before you go to market. You have to have the best team assembled before you start, or it's better to go to market fast and grow after that. So there are a lot of different theories, and founders are always getting content about everything entrepreneurship related, and it's a mess of information. What can we say? As the investors like a good story that makes sense, that is true from the beginning to the end, and sometimes it's a product already in the market, but that needs a shift or adjustments or fine tuning, and sometimes it's something that we are already yet developing, but we are prepared to launch briefly. But do you think it's better sometimes to have something new, unique, or it's better to already have competitors in the market because it's easier to understand the possible scale of that project?
Well, that's a very good point that you raise, because it touches a myth that exists in the ecosystem, let's say, and particularly in Portugal. Again, I think that there are some markets where they're a bit more mature, but this is a matter of time. I think that we're getting there, in which we have this illusion that if I have a great idea, a great project, if someone else is doing it, then I'm not going to do it because it's not new. And as you were saying, a concept that already exists and is already on the market is a market validation, is something that is signaling you that there is a demand in the market, that people are willing to put money into it. And if you are able to offer exceptional value in that market, you will prevail. Of course, there is an exception to that. I mean, if you have a monopolistic player in the market that has like a huge position of 70% of the market, and your solution is really doesn't create, differential in value that would motivate the customers, that's a different case. But if you are talking about incumbents, about people, that other companies that are now entering the market, they're doing their first sales, they're getting traction, that's market validation for you, and that's good. That's a great place to be, especially if you are able to produce a differential in quality that that differentiates you from that competitor and allows you to acquire a market space that is larger than your competitors.
Segmentation.
Exactly. I usually the example, I'm a bit annoying with this, but I usually make metaphors with cars and everything. And they always say, we have more brands than Daimler-Benz. They were the ones that created, the first car. And yet you have dozens, perhaps 100 brands of cars throughout the world. Because, each car is targeting a different segment and they still sell. They're still making a lot of money. And even when everyone is buying a car, Tesla comes along and they have a differential in their offer. They're still selling cars, but they're different cars. And now they're getting a market share. So working in a validated market is usually easier. When you bring a new idea, you need to be ready, something that is completely new. You need to be ready that there is always going to be an adoption barrier. People dislike new. We love new. So human beings have this tendency to love novelty, but we are very risk adverse. We have a difficulty, an inherent difficulty in trying something that someone else hasn't tried before and told us it's safe. So that is going to be a barrier of adoption in your market. Of course, if you're able to overcome that barrier and you're actually, solving a problem or bringing value to your customers, then you have the potential of growing fast and, acquiring the easiest picks of customers, which are the early adopters, which will cost you very little money to acquire, and that will give value to your company because now you're going to have a following of customers that will give you their money. But I should stress, if you pick any of the big companies out there that most people use as examples of innovation, none of them did anything that is completely novel. When Apple launched the iPhone, you had a lot of smartphones in the market. They just made a better iPhone. When Tesla launched electric cars, you had a bunch of electric cars out there. They were just crappy. When SpaceX decided to start launching rockets, you have rockets since the 1960s, putting stuff, in space. They just did better rockets, cheaper ones, reusable ones. When you have Amazon coming on board, you already had catalog purchases. You had, the younger audience probably is not aware of this, but there were a bunch of companies that were sending every year a big book to your house, with a catalog of all the products they had, and you could order by mail, and they would get to your house. So Amazon did not invent, mail in by mail, get stuff in your house at your front door at all. All of these companies, they just took a model that existed, a service, a product that existed, and they improved on it. And people were already familiar enough with it to acquire it. On the other hand, and again, picking on the easy to understand cases, just because everyone has heard about these companies, of course. If you take Apple again, they launched in 1990 something called the Newton. The Newton was a personal digital assistant, basically your smartphone without the phone. Okay, so it had a calendar, it had a notebook, it had a word processor, and it was a complete failure because at that time people were just not ready for personal digital assistants.
There was a lot of examples of that.
Exactly.
I used to have in the 90s a Palm Top, which was the precursor of tablets and the phone and the computer in your hand. But it was a way ahead of its time and dies by itself. A couple of big brands invested on that. Compact and other brands had their Palm Tops at the time. So it is wiser sometimes to look at the market and to look at the sectors and to have a zoom out perspective view of that sector, of the players in that sector, using the information and the knowledge that you have to find a differentiator, to find a formula, a special formula in what you can do something on that field, maybe a competitor of the existing players, but with a different approach or a special advantage that because you have an understanding, an interest, or a specific knowledge of that field, you can offer something that is that gives you a customer segment, that gives you a market share on that field, and you are going alongside the existing players, the existing competitors, and sometimes it's easier for the investors foreseeing the path you are going to do because they have the existing competitors to see, to look at, and to understand. As you said before, this is something that in Portugal it's not always well seen. We are constantly trying to find something completely wonderful and unique and trying to make it happen, forgetting sometimes that if no one did it before, it's very, very unusual that we are going to find the most wonderful idea that no one think of before. This is something that we see a lot in the appliances for programs and for investment a lot of the times. What do you think are the main tools that a founder can use to help him kill the bad idea? Of course, we are in a time that we have the most interesting people at the touch of the screen, literally. So we can ask for advice, as you said. This should be something very important to the founders. The network that they build on the process of becoming entrepreneurs is key to their sort of success. Do you agree with that?
Yes, definitely. I mean, now most people underestimate how easy it is to get help from someone. Most CEOs of big companies, and I've tried this myself. So I'm not talking out of my ass, some people that were extremely hard to reach for me commercially were the same people that I reached out for them using LinkedIn or sometimes even by email, just asking for their help. Like, please, I'm trying to do this. I don't know it very well. Can you please just give me a hint, give me a recommendation, give me your thoughts on this? You would be surprised at the number of times that people that you would never think would answer you will answer you and will help you. Of course, don't ask them for the world. Ask them for something that can, give you a quick feedback. But most people will be willing to put aside and help someone that is struggling just out of the blue.
Yeah.
I've surprised myself a lot of times with this.
I have the same experience, and you have to be specific, of course. You have to give them exactly the question that they need to answer, the way they can help you, and the majority of the times, anyone you ask for help, it's willing to help you and to assist you. So it's the most important tool that founders have.
I would also put there, almost on the same level, go to market before going to market. You know, nowadays it is very, very simple. I don't like to use cases of other companies, but I will again. Go and have a look on how Zappos and how Dropbox started their business. Dropbox started their business by creating a very good video in which they were showing Dropbox working before they had a single line of code written. And they created a website. They started taking pre-orders, paid pre-orders, and only after they had enough pre-orders that they saw, wait a second, people really want this. Then they started doing it. The guy from Zappos, he didn't have a website selling shoes. He had literally, he put some shoes online from stores around his region. People were buying them, and he was going to the stores, buying the shoes and sending them by mail, just to validate the idea. Nowadays, using social media, using websites and other tools, it is relatively simple to put your product out there. And I don't mean out there for free. You need to know if people are willing to pay for it. It's relatively easy to put it out there and do it, in a semi-manual fashion. And today you even have that amazing tool, which is a great tool that most people underestimate from a business perspective, which is the crowdfunding, which is the concept of getting your customers to pay for your product or service before you build it. As long as you're able to show them the value that they're going to get, and they're willing to pay. And that's the market validation of a lifetime. You are literally having your customers tell you, I am willing to pay for that now, even before you build it. So there are a lot of tools nowadays online. Things are a lot easier that you can use to expose your product or service to the market, and again, make it paid. Stuff for free is always easy. I subscribe to a lot of stuff for free that I never intend to use in my life, but it's free. Come on, what's the barrier of adoption there?
Yeah. And you have different levels. You start with the freemium model, and after a while you have a series of different prices for early adopters, and then you build your product a little bit further, and you have other features that allows you to have different plans, different pricings. You can scale step by step with the resources you build, you achieve. It's the best validation model you have. Market is always the best validation you can have, and then you can use traction, which is the most important, as I would say, the most important factor for investors to use traction to scale really big, to be an exponential growth company, and that is key for being global, being really successful. David, any final thoughts about this team? Anything you want to
Yes.
give? Again, mentors, as you said, are always giving time, always giving resources. Sometimes founders don't see it like this, but there are valuable resources sometimes. But that's one of the evidences that we are always willing to help founders and entrepreneurs to be successful, to grow, to have a better future. So, any final thoughts? Any final advice?
Yes, sure. Always remember that the most important asset that you have in your life is your time and your attention. Where you dedicate your time and your attention, those are the most important things you have. If you are going to be dedicating your time and your attention to something that is probably going to take most of it during the next years of your life, perhaps decades, make it count. Make sure that it's worth it. So be ready to not invest that time if it's not good enough. So have the courage to validate it and make sure that it is worth your time and your attention.
Yeah. And I would say that the world needs more startups, but needs good startups, not more traveling apps, social networks, photo sharing products, which are, by the way, a lot of the ideas that appear in
marketplaces.
the program.
How many marketplaces have you seen last year?
Exactly. How many marketplaces? So I would say that you need to zoom out, and look to the problems from a distance, and find something that interests you. Pay attention to the gaps, to the anomalies, to the things that could be solved, could be worked in a way that you can address, and because that's where the opportunities are. And I would say to the founders to keep working on being creative, on being a good builder, a leader, an engineer, a product manager, a communicator. Try to be a Renaissance man, like David Carvalhão, because this is true for everyone, not just for entrepreneurs or for founders. And in that way, the great ideas will come, and will come also the ability to understand those that don't let you anywhere, and should be left behind. And that's it. I think we can be on the end of this conversation. Please, everyone that come up with this video, check our website, YouTube website, to find out more content like this one about building startups. If you think you have a project or idea interesting enough for us, and you think we can help you send us the information about that by your project. Union Venture Builders is a cohort of experts and investors. We are using the best combination of knowledge and expertise to help early stage startups in transforming them in companies good enough to be invested. I want to thank you, David Carvalhão, for the excellent vision and knowledge that he have and that he brought us. We wish, of course, great success for your many fantastic projects. Thank you all for watching us. We will be back soon, so don't forget to subscribe your channel and stay tuned.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. It was a pleasure to have this conversation, and hope to see you soon in person in a more healthy setting.
Okay. So join the union and see you soon.
Bye-bye.